and then you should be seeing all of them. No, that we.
Hi, Your Excellency. Hello.
Hi, very good afternoon, Ihan.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can very well. Hi, Mr.
Okay,
Hamdan,
thank
how
you.
are you doing?
I'm okay. I'm good. It's
Hi,
morning here. It's morning
Yes.
here. It's around 9:30 morning here.
Yes, I hope you have your coffee and everything ready.
At our very early morning, because we are fasting now, Ramadan. Yeah,
Yes.
so a very early morning coffee. Yes. Yes, Dr. Tan, how are you?
Okay, haven't seen you for a long time.
I would like to come back, but I cannot come back now. I'm not sure whether I can come back for Raya or not.
Stay there, stay there. It's nice there, right? Lovely place, right?
Yeah, the weather is nice. The place is nice, but well, it's a bit lonely because my family are all in Malaysia, and my husband cannot come. Cannot come back to Nairobi due to COVID-19.
How's the situation in Kenya?
Kenya is around 200 plus now, positive, and what our worries is about the yesterday there are already positive cases in the slum.
Oh.
You know, in the communities. So previously it's only those people who are traveling, then they came back, but now it's already within the community. So
There's
within
no
community,
lockdown
it's a
there,
bit
right?
worries us. Yeah, it's worry us because it's the slum in Africa is not the same as the squatters in Malaysia.
Yeah.
Malaysia's squatters is much better.
But you
We have
haven't
water.
implemented any lockdown?
Yeah, we have lockdown. I've been already working from home since 16th of March. Working from home, totally closed UN. And we have curfew from 7 to 5. We cannot go out at all from 7 p.m. to 5 a.m.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
It's a curfew. Yeah. It's but daytime when you go out in a car, you can only even how big is your car, your private car, you can only have 2 passengers. You cannot travel 3 person in a car.
I think just today we opened up for two people in the same household, isn't it? Was it today or yesterday from Malaysia? Previously it was also one person. Yeah.
The phase 4 allows 2 persons.
Yeah.
That is about the, you know, they're trying very hard, but the only challenge is that here is now it's also raining season. It's a few and plus the natural disaster, flooding and then landslide, and then with all this that is in African region. But in other part of the world, in the Arab region, is also on the, you know, the crisis, you know, still political crisis, and hope to hear from Malaysia. I heard Malaysia is doing very well.
Are we doing very well, Hamdan?
I heard so.
My own personal view is that this is a multi-phased crisis, and we are going from one phase to another phase, and as we move into the phase of different phases, the challenge will only intensify, and this will likely be the case for the next 18 to 24 months. In fact, this is what we wrote about a month and a half ago, to say that this is a prolonged, extended crisis that you need to manage in a more cohesive and a coordinated manner with compassion, because it's not unusual times and requires unusual action, and we need to set aside ideology and be practical and pragmatic in facing the unknown unknowns, because we're dealing in an environment where things will evolve as we progress. And we're going to, and we need to think of it like in a systems approach. There's going to be multiple knock-on effect and so on. Because one action leads to multiple knock-on and so on. So now the lockdown has created multiple knock-ons. From that, you get another round of multiple knockdowns. So it's like a sequential that you see. And when does it stabilize? What will be the eventual fallout? And what will be the recovery after that? It's something to be seen, you know. But till the whole thing is running, it's very hard to stop. It's like a wave, right? You can't stop the wave. And the wave has to run its course. And then only you deal with the fact that about rebuilding, reconstructing, regenerating and all that stuff. So you just need if you ask me that Malaysia and so on, my comment would be that times of crisis requires steady hands.
But Penang has no cases. Actually, they should do like what China does. They just
We
lock
had
down
2
certain.
cases 2 days ago.
Oh, is it?
After 10 days, you had 2 cases. So it's really like, so these are the challenges that you face, right? In the sense that you don't know when you're out of the woods. And the reality is that the transmission of this is what we're dealing with. We're bringing down the R naught down to below 1 so that it doesn't transmit beyond a person. But it is still at large in your community. It can eventually, if a few people come together, and then it can start transmitting again.
I think that is probably what worries everybody, because the uncertainty is so much, and clearly with the measures that are taken, we also don't know how effective it is and how long it will be effective. So like you say, when once people congregate again, once we open up, then you have all this, all this impact coming back in.
We say that we need a new set of rules that will define the what they call life after all of this movement control. Because if you cannot get back to your old norms, and even if you want to get back to old norms, it will take a vaccine. You vaccinate many number of people, and they hope that the virus doesn't mutate. And until that comes about, you got to have a high level of discipline and conformity.
Let me just stop you there, so we can sort of kickstart the conversation for this webinar. I think what thank you so much, the 3 of you for joining on this webinar. I think what you just mentioned and discussed earlier precisely is why we're holding why REFSA is holding a webinar session like this, because I think we need to really start the conversation going and flowing on what are we expecting, what are the challenges, and also how can we rethink, and how should we look at going forward. So I think, and I would like to thank the attendees for coming, coming to join us. Just a quick one. I think today's session, we will keep it around 1 hour to 1 hour 15 minutes. We'll keep it sweet and short. If you have any questions, just put it on, and we'll see if our speakers can pull it out and answer them. I think today what we want to explore is a very important topic in my view, because I think countries around the world are trying to grapple with that, which is what Her Excellency mentioned, how this COVID-19 pandemic is impacting on cities, affecting the people that are living in it, in all sorts of life. And also we see that everywhere, cities around the world, they are scrambling for ways to restrict the people's movement, but at the same time attempting to ensure the essential services are still running. And this is not just on global, first tier cities. You're looking at secondary cities, you're looking at urban hubs as well. So I think it's a very crucial time for us to rethink our urban model. And even as we manage the complexity of this pandemic, I think we must ask ourselves what we can learn from this. Maybe we can start to consider how we can build resilience. With your experience, how do you see we can do this, so that we can create sort of cities that are inclusive, that is sustainable, and as many would say, in a very new post-COVID-19 world. So I think some figures from UN Habitat mentioned that over 95% of the total cases coming from urban areas. That is basically, sums it all up, 95% of these cases. So perhaps what I would do to sort of kickstart the session is to invite Dr. Tan to share your views on this. And further than that, we can have Mr. Hamdan to share on Think City and your work that you've been doing. You've been doing a lot of regeneration work. How do you see Malaysia and other countries? How can we deal with the upcoming situation? And obviously with Her Excellency's global effort in UN Habitat, how are we looking at cities, and how should we make sure that people living in it can continue their life economically and in good health? So Dr. Tan, maybe I'll pass that to you.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for taking the time to come and to listen to this webinar. I'll just share briefly about where I see things are, and then a few observations along the way, and then maybe we'll listen from the rest. So allow me to just put up a slideshow. Okay, this is a very interesting front cover of Time magazine, April. And I love the picture. I mean, it shows a frontliner, and he's trying to tell us that he's got this mask on, and he's trying to tell us that we must get it into our heads that our lives have all changed. Okay. So COVID-19 is a world pandemic. Basically, I think the only difference there is the word world. Pandemic is something that spreads all over the place. So you've heard different leaders say that there's nothing like this since World War II or the Spanish flu. So now that it has already happened, perhaps some of the scenarios we should look at. So I've put down what I think are the best case scenarios and the not so great scenarios. I think the first part of April, when we got into lockdown mode in MCO, we tried to keep our businesses alive. So whatever we needed to do, we already done in April. So now we got a bit more time to spend to think about what comes after MCO. And when you listen to the news, you know, CNN and so on, they are all biased towards American and Western. And I think sometimes we are missing some of the other knowledge that's out there in the whole world. So the best case scenarios, they said, is if a vaccine is found, of course, now they are saying 12 to 18 months. Or another case might be that it disappears in 1 or 2 years, like SARS, or the Spanish flu, or the Hong Kong flu in 68 to 69. But bear in mind, all these flus that came, they never found a vaccine for it. It just eventually just went away, or it mutated to other forms. The other way is, the third one is everyone gets immunity. You need at least 80% of the world's population to get it and to recover from it, and then you build some sort of immunity. And even then, nobody knows what the future actually is. So if you look at the best case scenarios, what the future built environment or the urban cities or what we do in our architecture and design, if it is very short, then life goes on with almost minor changes. It's just like a bump in the road. When you're driving, you hit a bump, you go over it, and then you continue on. So these are probably some of the best case scenarios. The not so great scenarios, the virus mutates and there's a prolonged pandemic. That means it goes on and on and on and on. Actually, if you look at case history, we are almost certain to get a second and third round. So if you look at the pattern of the Spanish flu, the second wave was worse than the first wave. Now, we would all like to be optimists and not a pessimist. And I would like to think that our medical people are strong enough to advise us how to go through without hitting a second wave. But we must always plan for the worst outcomes. So post-MCO, finding a new normal, everyone's talking about the new normal. I just want to say that what I have seen, or what every case study you look at, or every study or lesson, it probably only dates back to January 2020. There is no long history of academic literature on this. It is all very new case studies. So when you want to do case studies on this, the first, you must always look at who got it first and who came out of it first. So China is a good model. Western media today will not look at China, and they are starting to look to do the blame game. And suddenly you find nobody is looking at them. But I encourage you all, those who have contacts there. I have friends in Shanghai. They went back to work. Yes, it was a new normal, but there was so much new energy and everyone just wanted to get back to work. The young people had so many new ideas. When I get feedback like that, I get excited that, you know, that it's not all gone. Then of course we got information from internet, social media, mass media. They have become very, very influential. And the other thing we observed too was the incredible ability for the whole world to lock down. When China did it in January, I was in Europe and I was talking to my architect friends in Holland. And they said only China can do it because they are authoritarian, they'll put a bullet to your head or something. They can force a lockdown. Then suddenly we saw every country, even the most liberal countries, are able to lock down. Spain, Italy, fun-loving people. And India did it almost overnight, locked down the whole country. Wow, we are able to lock down incredibly fast and people do obey it. Then we start to look at observations of quarantine, lockdown essentials. We are very lucky in Malaysia. I'll speak a lot about the Malaysian context because when I saw some of the information coming out of US, and they got big shopping centers, the Walmarts, the Costco's, and people lining up round and round the block just to get in because they don't have many mama papa shops. They don't have small 24-hour shops. And we are very lucky in Malaysia because we got the Speed Marts, we got the MKs, we got Family Mart, we got a lot of small little shops. And we start to realize that when you go to those shops, there are no huge queues. You can just almost literally get in and get your stuff and then go home. So there's this, decentralization and small versus very large benefits. And of course, we have seen the rise of technology and virtual rooms, okay? Most of us had teleconference in our offices, but we never used it. We rather WhatsApp or we did a phone call, but suddenly we have all now have to become experts in it. This is from China. We are starting to do the SOPs for our offices as we start to open up. And I'm looking at examples. And when you do the SOPs in your office, you realize that working space between each other is 1 meter. But the SOP for lunch, where you eat, is 2 meters. So some of my staff asked me, why 2 meters? And I said, because when you're eating, you can't wear a mask. And because you cannot wear a mask, you need to be further apart. So these are some of the practical things. But in China, it looks like acrylic and plexiglass is going to do huge sales. And these are what they have implemented, okay? And you can see people having their lunch in the office or something and eating out. In the SOPs that we're developing for our office post-MCO, you are not even allowed to eat out. My office is in Subang Jaya, SS15. There's great food outside. When I told my staff you cannot eat out, they nearly died. They said, wow, we all want to be out of this lockout and go and eat all the great local food again. And then in the SOP, it says when you start to open up post-MCO, you have to order food in or you have to eat in the office, bring your own food. So, and this is a classroom. So looking at when our kids go back to school, wearing a mask like our frontliners is almost going to be essential, okay? So I'll just run through very quickly some observations that I've seen in this short period of case studies and observations. We are starting to see that diversity is better than homogeneity. The homogeneity is where you put everyone into one place of the same type, same kind. And I think what brought this about is when you see in US, where in Washington state, the nursing homes, the elderly nursing homes, that's where they got hit very badly and a lot of aged care people died. And now you find the same thing happening in New South Wales and also in the UK. So we have been developing wellness and aged care in Malaysia, trying to move this into a very Western model. Suddenly now we are finding we might need to take a step back and we look at it. I actually own a farm and I went into food production because it's part of the green philosophy that I want to try and investigate and learn. When we rear fish, you cannot put all the fish in one big tank. You got to put them in little tanks so that it's easy to quarantine. And at the same time, when you plant, we believe in a multi-crop rather than a monocrop. So some of the lessons we can pick up from there. So the other one is social distancing. Does it mean the end to the shared economy? Grab cars, Grab drive, WeWork places, co-working spaces. Are these spaces, is this whole shared economy, has it come to an end? I think the jury is still out on it, so maybe it's something to observe. So the bare essentials, connectivity is number one, your internet. So we find that, the old days it was food, clothing, and shelter. For some reason, we all got enough clothes and shelter. Some are okay, some are not that okay. And the other one, food, there's not been a major disruption to food supply. But we find that people are struggling for connectivity. And it's a very good thing in Malaysia, we got the 1 gigabyte free. And they want space, and they want comfort and solace. And these are what we are picking up. So one thing we noticed was some of my clients as developers, their sales of landed property shot up during the MCO. That means if they are developing the outer suburbs and they are doing landed houses, and suddenly on the internet, or they even signing SMPs by Zoom now. So their sales have actually accelerated. And I try to sit back and think what would cause this, and sometimes when you are staying in a small flat or an apartment, and you realize that this lockdown could happen again and again, over a period of time, and you need more space, or you're staying with your in-laws and outlaws and your extended family, and you find that it's better if everyone pools their money together and buy a bit of land and space. So that's something that we have observed happen. I know of a particular developer who did incredible sales, and I actually salute them for that. I think the other thing that we have been working a lot on the past 10 years are integrated developments. And I think as this thing goes on, we need to maybe relook back at separation, that certain building use types, they shouldn't be linked together. Taking a very bad example or very extreme example are like wet markets. Today, I think the onslaught is you'll probably find they will start to close down more and more of the wet markets because it's so easy for the spread to happen. And I think there's going to be a revival to village community where everything is self-sufficient. And looking back at the American model where everyone goes to shop in a Walmart or Costco in the whole suburb and having to line up long queues just to get in, and looking at small shops, mama, papa outfits, etc. Lastly, an observation is that there's a great opportunity for a new code of social ethics. Look at how our rivers have cleaned up by themselves. Look at how animals have started to appear on streets and, and things have come back alive. The end of pollution in the sky and also no plastic bottles in the drains. I think if we can pick up a new code of social ethics, it'll be something very good. So what is the new future living environment going to be like? It needs to be well connected by information technology. I believe that virtual rooms or gathering spaces will start to appear. The first Zoom drinking session I had was a bit of a joke. Everyone laughed. And then at the end of it, they asked, when is the next one? And we find that we are all humans and we still need to gather together or meet together. And I think that eventually each of us will have our own private rooms that you can actually meet your friends and you can meet your family members, you can meet your team leaders or your workmates. I think the safe space for rest and recreation, rest for resort, many people are starting to, because you cannot fly anymore, and this could last for a couple of years maybe, and people are starting to look back at living in a resort. If you see my background, I live in a pretty nice house because I'm an architect. But I also got my clients texting me, the past 2 weeks, and they'll say, thank you very much for the house you designed for us. And we never used the swimming pool for 3 years, and suddenly we are using it every day now. And I get all this feedback coming back to me. And I said, wow, enjoy it, please. Secure and able to self-isolate, lock down defensively. I think gated and guarded communities are interesting. Maybe it can go one step further because it can be an added place for testing, tracing, and isolation. So gated communities, in the past, some people argue that it's not very socially engaging with the community, but I think this is something that we notice when people are buying these landed houses. One of the requirements is that it must be gated and guarded. And I think if you take this one step further, it can also be screening, it can be separating out deliveries. That means things don't have to come to your front door, etc., etc. I just want to touch on 2 more things and then I'm done. Our commercial workspaces are changing. I've been in touch with quite a few people because we're trying to keep our companies alive. I'm in the private sector as against my other panelists who they are probably got no worries about money. But, when it started to happen after 2 weeks, we knew that most officers only have 3 months of reserve. And now this MCO is already stretching into 2 months plus. And we went into a survival mode. And I've spoken to quite a lot of practitioners, and they say that, the old ways of working are totally gone. When we go back to our offices, 50% will already learn how to work from home. And they want to now look at their office to transform it into one even wanted to transform it into a club, like a bar, where everyone just comes together once a week, have a drink, talk about some project ideas, and then everyone goes back home and do their own work, or they go back to their own little networks. So then it becomes a server node. So commercial spaces might see a decline in it for the property sector. Interior design and fashion, I'm a Star Wars fan. If you look at all the built environment of the future in the space, there are no frills and it's easy to clean. So I think with that, I will just show you some slides. So if you look at Darth Vader, almost 30, 40 years ago, he was already wearing a mask and he had breathing difficulties. And all his stormtroopers already wore masks. It was always the rebels that did not have masks, but the rebels were the heroes. So this could be one of the interiors, that of the future where everything is so clean, you don't have to worry about, you leave your shoes outside. I heard of Western homes today, they now start to take off their shoes. Whereas last time they always wore the shoes into the house. So that's another social ethic that might change. But I think for many of us in the tropics, this is still the ultimate dream. If you get a chance to go to a resort and go into seclusion, write a book. No. So I think I'll stop there and leave it to the rest. And then maybe we'll take questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Tan. I think you raised some very interesting points there from all different aspects. Especially, I think what one of the participants picked up the question is that you said that there are increases of land property purchases, and that could become a trend. But I mean, wouldn't that sort of encourage more sprawl? I suppose that could be a next part of the questions that we can look into together further with Mr. Hamdan. Mr. Hamdan, oh yeah, before I forget, I think one of my co-hosts actually put up a very quick poll for everybody to just quickly look into it. Over here, we just wanted to see among our participants here, which are more than almost 300 participants here that are joining us on this webinar, what do you think, which public space would you avoid or are the most concern to you? You can choose two. We can keep this running while we have our next speaker talking to us about his views. Now, Mr. Hamdan, you are the managing director of Think City, and we all know that Think City has been very, very instrumental in creating sort of new discussions and urban regeneration around cities in Malaysia, in Penang, and our very own heart of downtown KL. So looking at this pandemic, how it is shaping the measures on how we're interacting socially, like what Dr. Tan was mentioning about officers, about how we interact with other people. What are your views on our current sort of model that we are looking at where we have sprawls of landed properties, etc., and how can we shape it better?
Are you able to see?
Sorry, yeah, you need to unmute yourself first. Sorry, yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ihan, and thank you, REFSA, for this opportunity to share our thoughts and so on. It's definitely an opportune time to think about this issue, especially now that the reality has set in to say that the world is different. Sorry, I'm struggling. Prior to just before the pandemic, cities have always been the pathway for prosperity and progress, particularly in the last 100 years. Probably right after the what they call the Spanish flu in the 1920s, we saw a big boom in cities, and we've witnessed what we call the impact of the urban age, whereby a large scale of people have moved from rural to urban areas, and prosperity has been all around us. While at the same time, there's also been the negative effect of growth and development from this large scale urbanization, and that has been the reality. And before before BC, as we call it now, before COVID, the reality was that what they call cities saw an intensification of human interaction, and whether it's on our way to work or home, attending events, being in public spaces, and so on. It's all about human interaction. It's all about us getting together. It's all about celebrating, being happy, and being joyful. But all of a sudden, everything just changed. All of this changed dramatically overnight, and it will take a long time to come back to what it was before this crisis. And that's the new reality that we have to deal with. As Dr. Tan highlighted, and that new reality is going to be something totally different. For things to come to normal, the solution now will depend on how fast a vaccine is made widely available, or the disease dies out on its own. Here's a chart that says that it's your guess is as good as my guess. But we have seen that there's been some good news that the vaccine could be within the next 12 months or 18 months. But the reality is that in that interim period that we are going to be in, there's a new reality that is unfolding to enable cities to function while keeping the disease at bay. And that's going to be the challenge, in the sense that, are we ready to face that future, whereby, we are going to needing to walk around with masks. We got to have visors around us. There will be physical distancing. Hopefully there's no social distancing. And we can't gather in large groups. And there will be limitations to to operating. And COVID health and safety measures are already being seen today. And these are some images of what we see around the world. Different countries have imposed different rules and guidelines to ensure health and safety and physical distancing, even when the lockdown is lifted, is going to be a reality. These measures would affect how our cities are shaped, how people live, work, and play in cities. In fact, it even brings the question that whether cities will remain relevant. With the digital age, it opens up different questions altogether that we have never explored before, because we have lived in the age of cities, and probably now we may need to think about what would cities look like in the age of in a post-COVID world. So we have seen the COVID crisis also had led impacts to the world to think the unthinkable. China has been sending aid and assistance around the world, including to Europe. Prices of oil have gone south. People are rethinking our supply chains. They are talking about resilience. They're talking about redundancy versus just in time before this. And all of this will mean that your economy will be reshaped and reinvented. In fact, to some extent, some level of deglobalization could also set in. This will herald a new economic future, one that is either equitable, or we continue the inequality and follow the pathway of the Darwinian philosophy of the survival of the fittest. While we are now faced with the health crisis, the emerging economic shock will translate into a recession which could be protracted, and it's unlikely that that's something that we could avoid. The genie is out of the bottle, and we have to run its course, and we have to face the challenges. So there's a quote from Donald Rumsfeld from 2002, which I thought was interesting. When thinking about the future of cities in a post-COVID environment, there are many unknowns. There are known unknowns, but there are also many unknowns, and that will have long-term economic, social, and geopolitical implications. The world is a complex space. They are totally interconnected, and it's not linear. And it will have any action will have secondary, tertiary, the fourth order effect, and so on. The butterfly effect is what has been coined as a butterfly effect. It's a theory that it's a term that's been coined from KL theory. One small change in one part of the nonlinear system can cause a major impact in another part of the system. And we have seen this for the good in the case of how nitrogen oxide has disappeared from the air. By having this MCO, you have secondary, tertiary effect, that we have seen some goodness that's coming. But at the same time, there's also been a huge amount of disruption and dislocation that we see all around us. In fact, to some extent, that people are going through pain and suffering. Cities have been where human progress has happened. This is a fact that we all know. Now, is this fact going to be the case in the future? We believe, we in Think City believe that cities will be the pathway forward, because it will be through agglomeration economies, the scale effect and network effects from the concentration of human population in cities that we will see growth and continued growth and development. In the post-COVID world, cities are still important, and what we need to do is reimagine how cities need to adapt. And this is a lesson that we need to adapt, or learn from nature. Evolutionary biology tells us that we as human beings are very adaptive, and we now need to make our cities to become adaptive and resilient. However, in making planning for the future, we are often short-sighted. We always deal with what we know, what we can see, and what we can touch and feel. Making the right decision is rarely obvious. Example on the left, at the right hand, on the end of 19th century, one of the greatest challenges in the cities was dealing with horse manure. To remove horse manure, you needed more horses. The problem was resolved with the advent of motor car. So you have some sort of totally different change, radical change. And similarly, a Kodak employee actually invented the first digital camera in 1985. However, Kodak's management dismissed the idea Over the next few years, Kodak continued to ignore the threat of digital to their business and failed to understand and capitalize on the disruptive technology of digital photography. Kodak failed to adapt, and today they filed for bankruptcy in 2012, totally disappeared. So what we say when we're advocating is that we need to look at multiple futures, because the futures is totally unknown. And scenario planning is a useful tool for thinking about the future of cities. Shell pioneered this concept, scenario planning, and continues to use it till today. Scenarios are not prediction or forecast, but examining possibilities of futures. They are meant to help anticipate the uncertainties of the future so that better decisions can be made. This is an example of 4 scenarios based on the uncertainty of physical distancing on the horizontal axis, whether we eventually revert to physical distancing pre-COVID, or if physical distancing is here to stay. On the vertical axis, whether the future of government becomes more consolidated, or whether it becomes more fragmented or decentralized. The future may be a combination of some of these 4 scenarios, and that's going to be the new reality. In fact, we are already seeing New Zealand and Tasmania are emerging to talk about creating their own bubble. In fact, there's going to be what we call virtual unionism, and there's also discussion about small is beautiful, as opposed to being the mega scale and so on. In fact, we need to rethink all of those things that has come from the industrial age. A lot of what we have seen in the 20th century has been remnants from the industrial age, and we continue to proliferate that, and that has come to naught, and there's a need to actually rethink altogether. Planning is typically done at the national, state, and local levels everywhere around the world, and we know this has been the reality. However, thinking about planning at the territorial scale is going to be needed. In fact, it's helpful. And this is a map of the US. This is done by the former president of RPA, Robert Yarrow. And when COVID first spread in the US, early maps showed the pattern of contagion following these mega regions. The pandemic doesn't respect arbitrary political boundaries. Issues such as environment and managing city regions are larger issues that may be better dealt with at the regional or territorial level. So there's a need to think about how are we organized? Are we organized in the right size, right scales, and so on? This is something that we did in Malaysia, and where we have been advocating for that you could have a new approach of a polycentric model system of cities for Malaysia's future. In fact, we think this should be the pathway forward in terms of balancing the intensified concentration of growth and development in Kuala Lumpur alone. In fact, Kuala Lumpur accounts for nearly 50% of Malaysia's GDP, which is a high concentration risk. With COVID, there's very likely some level of deglobalization, where hyperlocalism at the regional local level becomes important. In fact, we are already seeing this. People are responding to crisis because they don't want China to be the only supplier. Neither do we want to have our food to come from a single source. We are all now thinking about the need to enable local economic development, to empower small businesses, as what Loke Mun said earlier. Fortunately, we have now not gone to the extreme of embracing the American model of development. In particular, the example was the hypermarket, but we were there. We were going on the same pathway. Hopefully, this crisis will provide reason for the whole industry, particularly real estate sector, to rethink the models of development that is needed to ensure a more balanced development. Another illustrative example is of scenario planning is cities in a post-COVID world, where I think probably spoke about the idea about that we could be moving more towards a virtual connected world, or we could be moving in our own bubbles. But it's unlikely that we're going to go back to our normal. So what does all of this different scenario mean, and so on? So existing models will need to be re-examined. All of this will impact our cities. Many businesses will rely on maximizing the number of users or customers at one time in the past. But the reality is that this will not hold. Sports, concerts, business conferences, restaurants, all will need to be revamped. Whatever that were in the past needs to be reassessed and rethought. It doesn't mean that you cannot operate, but it's just that you've got to be reimagined for a new future. For example, if strict physical distancing is enforced in restaurants, only half the tables can be occupied at any one time. The restaurants may not be able to cover its cost to make a profit as business is halved. So the reality is that they may go out of business altogether. Similarly, for budget airlines, every seat has to be kept empty. Every alternate seat has to be kept empty. Airline prices, ticket prices will go up, and people will travel less. This would have knock-on second, third order impact on tourism and travel, and including even retail. So in a hyper-connected world, these are going to be radical shifts that we are going to see. COVID will also give rise to inequality, which is made worse by the digital divide. An example, this was in The Guardian today, which I read, saying that 26 million Americans lost their jobs, while billionaires added 304 billion US dollars. Jeff Bezos alone has added 24 billion. So there are going to be winners and losers, and the winners and losers are going to be highly concentrated. COVID will accelerate the trends such as automation and telecommuting. It will digitalize the world more. It will bring the issues about security versus privacy debates. Governments will have a greater access to personal information, particularly the need to control and contain disease. And this will then open up other issues about whether this will be used for sinister purposes. COVID will also see the continued trend of the dominance of big tech. A lot of small companies will be pushed aside. In fact, you're going to see a dominance of the big tech because the market will rush, and there's going to be a highly concentration of this. We should also not dismiss the fact that that we need to reassess density at cities, and we need to balance urban growth to avoid diminished marginal returns. In the past, what we have seen is that mega cities have emerged as a result of concentration of government's efforts to push the development in one or two locations, whether it's Shanghai, Beijing, in Malaysia it's Kuala Lumpur, in India it's Mumbai, Delhi, and kind of stuff, as opposed to using the rest of the cities in each one of these countries in a more effective manner. Can growth be distributed more while embracing the idea of polycentric development? Economics tells us that there's always diminishing marginal returns at play. But at the same time, we don't want to lose the effects of agglomeration, the network effects of coming to cities and so on. There's an image of people holding umbrella. People ask me, what was this image? We wanted to highlight to say that, this has been new models of how people are thinking about preparing to operate in a COVID world. This was an example in Kerala where people used an umbrella as a simple way to create a physical distancing. And the government in Kerala is distributing free umbrellas for everyone. So that way, then you can actually comply, can increase and ensure high level compliance. There will be trends, as you can see, that conversation, people are buying houses away. I think this is one of the questions that's been asked about sprawls and so on. Counter-urbanization, suburbanization will become popular. But we believe that it's better to embrace polycentrism and to invest in second, third tier cities and create more physical and digital connectivity in a more effective manner that allows us to move seamlessly, as opposed to embracing the idea of urban sprawl and so on, because eventually this will only lead to problems. Few more slides. There's also opportunity for Malaysian cities to think about improving well-being. There's a need to rethink about what the future. This crisis opens up an opportunity to say, look, I think we need to set aside this whole pursuit of purely profits, pursuit of or just being driven by the market economy and believing that the market will answer all problems. The reality is that we need to rethink and reimagine our future. This crisis is an opportunity to reset. Some people may not like what I have to say, but I believe that some of what we have held in the past needs to be totally reassessed. These are examples of cities that are actually thinking about a new approach. This was just before the crisis in Melbourne, about 20-minute neighborhood, and in Paris. And more recently, this is a donut model that is trying to actually bring a thriving city that's socially just and ecologically safe. This is an approach that Amsterdam is embracing. This is being one of the key advisors for this work has been this economist from Oxford, Kate Raworth, who introduced this concept of a donut economic model. And some of you can look it up. It's a good reading, and that forces us to rethink about the role of cities and how can we ensure that we can move towards more integrated live, work, play. But we should not blind ourselves. While there's issues of inequality that I've raised, we are also while we are trying to manage the COVID crisis. There's a greater climate crisis that is looming, and that's behind us. And we should not ignore and go into a slumber and feel that has disappeared altogether. And especially that our airs have been cleaner, our rivers have become much more improved and so on. We could go back to feel that as if the climate crisis is not an urgent and important thing, especially now that we just celebrated the 50th anniversary of the Earth Day. And last slide, COVID provides us an opportunity once in a century to hit the pause and reset button, how we are thinking about the future of humanity. How can we better plan our cities? We got to think beyond profits and GDP. Even before this crisis, the World Economic Forum, probably the guardian of the capitalists, even has started to think about these issues. In fact, they have already set up committees to talk about, to move beyond shareholder economy towards the stakeholder economy, the need to ensure that society as a whole cannot be compromised. And I think I must commend that the time has come for UN to accelerate the achievement of the pathway to achieve the sustainable development goals as we think about resetting our countries and finding ways to move forward and using the crisis as an opportunity. So with that, maybe I'll take questions during the session and answer any queries that comes up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hamdan. Thank you very much for the presentation. You touch a lot on a lot of different points. If I can sort of quickly sum it up, we're talking about deglobalization, where economically and even labor movement, you may even need to consider internally look into your domestic sort of market. Obviously, residential is a big issue when it comes to sprawling versus polycentrism that you mentioned on the growth of on the second or third city. You mentioned about climate change. I have a question here that perhaps you can think about, but I will just move on to Her Excellency first. Is on urban mobility, where we are talking about because there's a need for sustained social distancing. So we need to rethink our space and question how the benefits of densely populated urban areas are. So how do we deal with the question of traffic? Cycling advocates point to roads that have been closed to cars, and they think that, oh, you should stay that way. All these are also part of the big sort of climate change framework. How can we create a more car-light society post COVID-19? These sort of things. Maybe we can come back to that after the third presentation. Before I go into that, we have the poll results shared here. I think it's just a fun interactive poll. Basically, it looks like, again, digitization and the internet connection helps, because I guess to most people, the cinema isn't as important anymore as say, for example, going to the restaurants and bars when you have Netflix and things like that. So moving on, I would like to it's my pleasure and my honor to invite Her Excellency Maimunah to join us for this. Thank you so much for dialing in from Nairobi, Kenya. Good morning again. So as we all know, I think UN Habitat is at the forefront of coordinating global efforts on coping and recovering on the whole pandemic. I understand that you have also developed a COVID-19 policy and program framework that provides guidance and scale your effort. And you mentioned in a recent video, which I think is very apt, that the COVID-19 crisis is also an urban crisis, not least because urban areas are where they intensify the spread and transmission. Now, Hamdan mentioned about winners and losers, and I think one of the biggest losers, if we may say, and as you may attest to it, is the people living in very crowded, densely populated urban areas. So perhaps you can share with us how cities around the world are coping and responding, the challenges that they are facing, what kind of policy responses that should be rolled out to mitigate this, and obviously not forgetting the issue of inequality and ghettoization, if I may put it.
Thank you very much, Ihan. A very good morning, afternoon, and evening to all of you from Nairobi. And Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and happy Ramadan now. Thank you very much for including UN Habitat as a part of this webinar. I already sent I think a few slides to the admins. I hope that you can put it up on the screen.
Yeah, bear with me a second. I will put it up.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, Ihan. Thank you. Yeah, as you mentioned correctly just now, we are the agency in the United Nations tasked with promoting socially and environmentally sustainable cities and human settlement. So the COVID-19 pandemic is forcing us to respond quickly, but also to revisit our approaches, to revisit our normal. As we are fully engaged in the United Nations COVID-19 response and socio-economic implications, as an immediate response to the pandemic, UN Habitat has provided seed funding for over USD 1.3 million for scaling up the 13 countries, 1.3 million for scaling up project in 13 countries with community preparedness, outreach and hygiene support. That will be in the next slide, Ihan. And the agency has also launched the United Cities and Local Government, UCLG and Metropolis, a webinar beyond the outbreak, together with so many mayors and partners, a virtual live learning series for mayors and local leaders to share urban solutions. So indeed, this is a great opportunity actually for us to think beyond the current crisis. After the COVID-19, the world will not be the same, as we heard from the last two speakers. It is possible that existing institution models and entire economic system would need to be reconfigured. Business as usual will not be an option anymore. So the cities are governed and managed, and the way central and the local governments coordinate action will need to be drastically changed. So all this, amid all the emerging research and opinion, UN Habitat suggests focusing on 4 recovery priority areas post-COVID-19 that are essential for the functioning of the cities. We, during the very early part in March, we already on the 16th of March, we already working from home until today. And we came out, if you visit our website, we came out with the key messages, the United Nations UN Habitat Statement on urban housing, affordable housing, on on the slum upgrading, and also on mobility. At the same time, we are now looking into the COVID-19. And for me, this is the opportunity beyond the current crisis. And I think that what we can look at that after the COVID-19, as I mentioned just now, the world will not be the same, and the business as usual will not be an option. But we are trying to suggest, I have set up one team to look into the 4 recovery priority areas for post-COVID-19 that are essential for the functioning of the cities. And we believe that this team can provide a clear analysis of cities and medium-term response and action in order to avoid an overly fragmented. I agree with Dr. Tan and Hamdan just now. We need an integrated. I'm always promoting integrated, holistic, sustainable development plan and clear analysis to the medium term, and to avoid overly fragmented framework of intervention. Next slide, Ihan. The 4 areas that we are looking at is that the rethinking the state, reorganizing local governance mechanism. This is very important, that and to see how the local governance now work. Second is addressing the increase of poverty and exacerbation of inequalities in cities. And third is rethinking urban morphology and typologies, creating new evidence on density and compactness. We already talked about just now, the density and compactness, and reducing the risk of failure on the current urban economy model. Please allow me now to explain briefly each of these areas in more detail. We go back to the slide on the rethinking the state, reorganizing local governance mechanism. We are now already witnessing reduced capacity of governance to produce public goods, ranging from the very basic urban services like water and sanitation and parks. Like in Nairobi, water and sanitation is like is worth more than gold now, to broader public service system. Today, it is clear that these systems are particularly ill-suited and ill-equipped to deal with the pandemic. I'm talking it in global, maybe not in Malaysia, but globally. This is partly the result of reduced funding and attention to education and health. How we privatize public facilities and institutions, the reduced fund for public services and decrease essential subsidies, creating structural problems to respond to a crisis of this magnitude. Well, while some government may resort to a more authoritarian position, like in China, as what Dr. Tan mentioned just now, COVID-19 actually present an opportunity to revisit social and democratic structure, rethink the state and its institution, redesign social contract, and advance inclusive system of governance. So in this process, governance relation between central and local authorities will need to be the center of the agenda, helping to clarify how city competition and city collaboration with other tiers of government can redefine, form a synergy, complementary, connections, and participation, and redefining the way cities operate in order to enhance their ability to respond to emergencies and prepare for recovery processes, both within their boundaries and beyond. So, effective recovery system and possible new pandemic responses require a whole of government and whole of city approach with clear collaborative mechanism and capacities and resources from multi-sectoral state and local and non-state actors. So in the post-COVID world, cities should be empowered to assume stronger leadership in coordination roles and responsibilities in provision of public goods, including health and security, and in the governance and management of public and urban affairs, and in the society's resilient and institutional effective response. They need to do this with strong participation of all actors, including small businesses, private industries, and investors. So now I would like also to look into the share with you a few data. Over 1,500 cities in 210 countries affected by COVID-19. Over 95% of the total cases in urban areas. 1 billion people live in informal settlement and slum, in overcrowded and inadequate housing. 2.4 billion people lack of adequate access to safe water and sanitation. So how can we, why this thing happen? So that link me to the second part of my slide, is that addressing the increase of poverty and the exacerbation of inequalities in cities. Globally, you can see that is the gap is too big. Why? Even now, during one of the webinar in UCLG and Metropolis, one of the speakers said that, why now everything can happen? Meaning that why there is no eviction now? Why people can reduce the mortgage, the mortgage rate now? Why the decision maker can give incentive? Because they put people at the center of their decision making. So we have to bring back to this. So COVID-19 has disrupted the global economy. I think in the slide of Hamdan just now was made it very clearly. Demand, supply, and finance have been deeply affected. Trade and value chain disrupted. The propensity to consume will decrease and the global FDI will collapse. This including a reversal in international investment in emerging markets. According to ILO initial estimate, unemployment will rise globally by around 24 million and underemployment will increase at a large scale. So COVID-19 has shown that in different parts of the world, the precarious nature of employment, formal or informal, makes family very vulnerable and increases the possibility of deep domestic and community economic crisis. More and more people are lacking unemployment insurance, health insurance, paid leave increase the prospect of further social and economic deterioration. So in slum, where approximately 1 billion people live, and other areas of cities where disadvantages are concentrated, there is likely to be a heavy economic and social toll for families and further polarizing society. So initial estimates indicate that global GDP will decrease by around 3 to 4% and perhaps even more. For Asia, ADB predicts regional growth contracting from 5.5% forecasted in 2019 to 2.2% by the end of 2020, with a loss around 68 million jobs. So the loss of employment, of the reduction of its advantages and conditions for important sectors and population will generate greater social polarization. The impact will be larger in cities, particularly in those where inequalities patterns already existed. UN Habitat documented in the World Cities Report 2015 that 70% of the cities in the world were growing more unequal. In 2015, the World Economic Forum considered that inequality was a universal concern and one of the major threats to world stability. This pandemic will further exacerbate the urban divide and put at risk world stability. So differentiated access to opportunities, income and consumption, public space and services, health, education, technology, employment will become more visible in the city, and disadvantages will be concentrated in specific areas and neighborhoods. So when implementing post-COVID-19 responses, local authorities or local government have the opportunity to become the institutional drivers for inequality reduction. In order to trigger a process for real change with lasting effect, national government must set a clear objective and targets to be supported by their capacity to manage shared development by local authorities. So this is the second part that we are going to do, and we already have set up the task force to look into this. The third part is, I think this is also touched by the two speakers before, rethinking urban morphology and cities typologies, creating new evidence on density and compactness. So we see that city will see lasting changes created by pandemic, from the economic and the community fabric to the physical structure. Some of them are clearly observable, such as travel restriction, the use of public space, mass meeting in stadiums, and large gathering spaces. But after COVID-19, there will be a strong argument for cities to be de-densified and physically and socially separated. UN Habitat guidelines and policies for cities to become denser, concentrated, socially diverse as key ingredient of inclusion and urban sustainability will be seriously questioned by the concept of preventive infection transmission. I think we are also looking into an area that go back to the basic. We were taught during our days, and I was a planner. I said neighborhood concept, garden city. So although densities and proximity are good for social interaction, inclusion, walkability, economic development, for the provision of public goods, as well as for improving energy efficiency, environmental sustainability, the compelling demand for public health are likely to seriously question them. So there is a need for new design urban solution, Dr. Tan, to you, and urban planning guidelines that assess the correlation between density and disease transmission and covariance with income and the other causal determinants, that offer strategies to harness the opportunities and mitigate the potential health risks of urban agglomeration. So the crisis has demonstrated that the level of physical building density is not an indication of protection, but rather the adherence to layers of adequate standards in terms of decent quality housing and non-crowding occupancy rate in each housing unit. So in other words, it is not the physical setting, but we have to bring in the human behavior. The factor here is a human, the people in the space that brings about the health issues. We go back to the economics of scale and agglomeration are essential for economic growth, job creation, innovation, creativity, and technological development. It will been discussed by the two speakers earlier. There are also important drivers for public health improvement, for mass responses to people in needs. So I would like to bring to the World Resource Report that towards a more equal city. It is after all the lack of access to essential services such as water, housing, and differentiated access to healthcare system has been increased the challenge of responding effectively to COVID-19 in many densities. So how cities are to be planned? This is one of the areas that we are looking at. The use of technology and data, the adoption of novel urban solutions, the new codes and regulation, urban and regional planning, working relation and community mobilization. All this will be an opportunities to promote affordable, non-polluting transport, better visual connection, and a return of urban ecosystem and truly green cities. And last is reducing the risk of failures of the existing urban economy business model. This is very, very important. This is the fourth theme that we are studying now. COVID-19 will take unprecedented toll on cities' finance. Not only citizens, workers and businesses would be affected, and also the fiscal capacity of the government in areas where revenue is generated, retail sales, incomes, wages, and real estate. As you know that I saw the first slide of Hamdan, cities is an engine of growth. But cities that rely heavily on income tax for real fund revenue will be severely affected after this, when employment will continue to drop, and thus the source of money for the city. So other cities will be affected when national government will be forced to redirect public investment, redefine priorities, and eventually reduce the transfer of resources to them. And the peculiar nature of the local economy associated with the economic crisis of the pandemic will reduce tax base, but now there are no hawkers, there is no restaurant. And this impact will depend on the city's tax structure. So as cities will face fiscal shock associated to the pandemic, adjustment in budgetary expenditure will be required. It is also very likely that cities and state or provincial government will face a big challenge to maintain their pension scheme. So I also would like to conclude here that we are working together. We are committed to work with the thought leader and the partners to further study the 4 areas of the urban perspective. And based on the finding, we intend to put forward policy position, technical advisory solution. While there is a possibility for the world economy to go back to business as usual, it is hoped that it can be developed into a more cooperative, solidarity-driven system based on the lesson learned of COVID-19. And UN Habitat sees the current crisis as an opportunity to recommit to the principle of sustainable urbanization to achieve SDG 11 and other urban-related targets. And we are looking forward to working with you in these endeavors. And my last slide just now, you see the table there. We are already putting up the UN Habitat response. We are, for the 2020, we need 72 million in order to do the 3 response area in the areas of 20 countries in Africa, 11 in countries in Arab states, 17 in Asia Pacific, 16 countries in Latin America. So the total is 72 million. Who knows, maybe there is a philanthropists and developers and the businessmen in Malaysia who would like to collaborate with us. Please, we are most welcome. Thank you very much, Ihan, for this opportunity. I'm sorry it's a bit long. I think because I didn't talk too long to the Malaysian, then I take the opportunity to share my thought on this topic. Thank you very much. Over to you, Ihan. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much for having. I mean, we are very privileged to have you here to share with us what UN Habitat has been doing and what are the general framework that you have been working on. So, we are very grateful that we can provide you the space to chat about this. So I think we have about, if I want to try and keep into timing, we have about 10-15 minutes to before we end the topic. I just want to bring. Sorry, Hamdan, do you want to say something?
No. Sorry, I'm so apologize. Great.
Okay, no, it's okay. So before we go back to a couple of questions.
Bring something up.
Yeah.
I think I saw some of the questions talking about PPR housing and how uncomfortable and terrible they are. You know, I think one of the observations that I mentioned in my notes just now is how the whole world managed to lock down. And the reason they locked down is because they listened to science and not to politicians. So if you look at what is actually happening here, for too many years, politicians have told us what type of housing we need, what type of solutions we need, and so on and so forth. And suddenly, when this pandemic hits the whole world, everyone is listening to the scientists. So everyone is saying today, follow the data. And you know, as a professional designer architect, we have always stuck to professional science and data. Just that when politics is running the country, and you know, we just came out of a very interesting political situation in Malaysia, straight before this COVID thing. So when the COVID lockdown came in, all of us thought, wow, it's a good time to take a rest from all this political stuff that's going round and round. But for the first time, you see Trump standing next to the science people, and the science people are telling them, and nobody wants to listen to what Trump says. They're asking, what are the statistics? What does the science and data say? So when you look at PPR housing, to meet a housing quota is a political thing. It doesn't mean that it is better housing, and is actually sentencing the poor people to a life of debt, and as well as that suffering. If your house your apartment is facing east and west, you know, it's like a oven. So when you look at these sort of things, this occurrence has actually given the power back to the scientists, the technologists, the people who work in the area of science and truth. And the other thing is also, it gave the power back to individuals and to families. The order was, when nobody had a solution, they say, stay at home. Basically, they're giving back the power to the house. And I think this is an opportunity that we should take, and we should not, I know some of you might disagree with me, we should not let politicians again tell us the best way to do things, because they don't always know what's the best thing to do. And I think that whenever we start listening to science back, I think that we will find a better solution for our cities.
All right, I can just quickly add, I just think that, you know, the whole market economy has led to create scarcity of land. When land should be governed by government in a more effective manner, not to make it into a market commodity good. And I think the failure lies in the sense that, you know, when private interest is not managed, it ends up going in the wrong direction with bad policies from government. So combine both together, then you have situation that we are now faced with. You know, there's no reason why we as human society need to create very difficult living environments for fellow human beings when God has and made around us. That's because it's Ramadan. I'm just reflecting only from my own philosophical perspective. Ian.
Yeah, sorry, your line was a bit fuzzy there, so there's a bit of lagging, but it's okay. I think we hear you well and clear. Actually, why don't we go to the poll results that we just have? I think it's shared now. That it looks like you know, even all the participants were looking at what they see are most important in improving the urban planning is in terms of better design and zoning for housing areas. So I don't know if Hamdan and Loke Mun, do you have anything else that you would like to add on this sort of observation?
What are the polling results?
Oh, can you see it?
I took mine down. Can you post it back up?
Yeah, hold on. Yeah, hold on.
Polling 1, right?
No, polling 2. Here you go. Can you see it?
Okay.
Well, basically, we have a whole host of choices for people to choose in terms of what we would like to see improve the most. And I'm so sorry, it's my daughter.
So like I said earlier, that I think that definitely things have not gone in the right direction in terms of how housing has been delivered in Malaysia. It has been seen as an economic sector. when it is actually more fundamental about provision of shelter. And I think everyone here wants a better design and better, what do you call, developed shelters, be it high rise or dense and so on. Dense can work if it is designed well with the right kind of amenities and services, and also thought through with understanding nature and so on. So I just think that, you know, we need to learn from the mistakes. Primarily, I believe that we need to actually realize that scarcity of land is a creation of man. Recently, I saw this in Penang, where the housing price has been, affordable housing prices are being brought down. So it raises the question to say that if we can go up, can also come down. So the scarcity is, unfortunately, maybe it's artificial.
So it's almost a change of mindset. Whether are we still treating housing as a public good, or are we still treating it as almost like a type of investment where you have this almost phenomenon where people buy 5, 10 houses just because that's the place that they can put in their money, hoping that it will keep increasing, and that sort of create the whole entire market. Yep. Loke Mun, is there anything that you would like to add to this point?
I think basically, you know, when we look at some of the way that our cities have gone, it's actually a full combination of all the wrong people managing it or directing its policies. And I mean, as architects and even the planners, there are actually a lot of great ideas out there working with people like Think City. But sometimes we are always seen like the alternative, the fringe people, the weirdos, the ones who just wants to do one project and try and shout about it. But there are many truths in it. And now, you know, when all the cards are down, when nobody can predict the future and times are tough for the next 2 years or 3 years at least, then they are suddenly throwing it back to us and saying, "Wait, what is the future like?" And I think this has a great opportunity. You give it back to the architects, to the Institute of Architects, to Think City. And if developers will even fund ideas, competitions, think tanks, I think you'll get a lot more out of it. And don't let it become back a political game. Meeting quotas of poor people's housing, it's not really nice.
Agreed.
Yep. Her Excellency, is there anything you would like to add to this point?
Yeah, I think I would like to go back to very basic of a human being. They need a place called home. Yeah, they need to live. They need to go for the employment, to work. And of course, our body, if we during the COVID-19, we are stuck in the house. We also need a recreational place. So I heard just now you're saying that live, work, and play. And then that is go back to the basics, is what we are, and putting people at the center of our decision making. But I think what we need to put up to our decision maker, we must, as a professional, I think we must be a data proven. We must have evidence. We must have a data. Sometimes as we talk, there is no proof, there is no data, then is useless. For example, now we have been talking about climate change for umpteen years, but with one COVID-19 pandemic, you can see the river is clean, our carbon footprint is reduced. We can do it. But why now after COVID? So I think this is the now is also the best time for us to collect data and to put it on the table. If you do this, this will be the impact. If you do this, this will be the, is proven. So I think now we have to use science and technology, and also the social part. Don't forget about the social and culture in tackling whether we want to talk about housing, you want to talk about employment or business center, or we want to talk about recreational. So I think as a human, just reflect. I would like to, I said in the webinar, use this lockdown period to unlock new opportunities for us after this post-COVID. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you very much. We don't have a lot of time left, but I would just like to ask one question for all the panelists, because I think this is also quite important, even though it doesn't really relate to urban planning per se, is the role that technology and the whole idea of surveillance that we should probably start considering as well. So because all the proposals to ease the lockdown measures, contact tracing through technology seems to be playing a very prominent role. So, and with smartphones, and most of us are already experiencing the city with an sort of added digital layer. But we can start seeing a future where we will be tracked everywhere. Perhaps even deny entry in certain places, depending on our virus safety rating, as already is happening in China and things like that. So this kind of evolution, what is your view? Should it be encouraged? Are there ways that we can leverage sort of the positive effects without tipping into a surveillance state? How do we ensure that technology and smart city don't result in new kinds of ghetto or greater inequality in the city?
You want me to respond first?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, okay. I involved in one of the webinar with the mayors, global mayors, on digital and technology. But it's good. You now see that everything is on internet. Education is on internet, and purchasing is on internet. Consumption is on internet. But don't forget, 50% of the urban population still not linked to the internet. Yeah, there are still global gap. Yes, it's good, but that's why we at UN Habitat, we just launched our people-centered smart city. Put the people at the center, people-centered smart city. So we would like to increase, of course, the technology in terms of the role of technology is very, very important, but put the people at the center and look into the infrastructure. Now, I think that is the government have to, either is Malaysian government or any other government have to look into the investment in terms of the true infrastructure. The infrastructure is really needed by the people. The money is there, but sometimes it's put wrongly in terms of the priorities. So I agree with the role of technology, but I would like it to put people at the center of the smart city program. Otherwise, we will be doing with the vendor who trying to promote their smart cities solution, but actually we don't have the capacity at the local level, at the local government, or the people who are using the technology to use. And don't forget, there are still people out there, even in Malaysia, I know, even in my village, in my kampung, there's still no internet. I was told that my nephew, they need to go to do the homework, but they cannot go to the town of Kuala Pilah because of the lockdown. So they will be left behind. They will be left behind. I'm so sad. That's my nephew and my niece. I still cannot get the internet in Kampung Sungai Dua Besar, Kuala Pilah. I put it here. So I think this is good to have, but make it more balanced. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yes, Hamdan.
No, I just wanted to say that we need to ensure that growth and development is well distributed, but at the same time, it doesn't end up becoming sprawls and so on. And then the issue would then arise: how do you deliver infrastructure in the most effective manner? So one of the lessons that we learned was from the World Development Report 2008, Reshaping Economic Geography. It talks about the 3 principles of distance, division. It calls it the 3 Ds. Then the distance, division, and density. It says that reduce this, and that means reduce distance. It means and ensure that by very good public transportation connection and so on, or even virtual infrastructure now that allows for people to be connected. Division is actually to ensure that regions are not separated by borders. Borders become more porous. And density, it means organize people in the most effective manner that you're able to create effectiveness out of density, and so on. So those are the 3 lessons that we can probably do as part of reflecting a pathway forward.
Okay, yep. Loke Mun, anything else to add on this?
I think basically, I look at this pandemic that's happening now as, many see it as a problem, but I see it as a time of great opportunity. That there is a chance, it could last, it could be over like nothing. It could just disappear like SARS. And God forbid that we just go back to what we've been doing before, because then we will be hit by another one and we will not be ready again. I think that would be the worst case scenario that I can think a city can come out of this, doing. Now, if you look at it going 2 to 3 waves or lasting 2 or 3 years, of course, there are a lot of people who are already hurt, businesses, airlines, hotels, F&B, and event organizers, they're all in trouble. But if we look at it and try and pick something positive out of it, we should really take hold of it and do it now. I don't know how long the window of opportunity is, but our knowledge and case studies only go back to January. And people have been trying, they were in survival mode. We were all in the front line defending our hospitals and so on. Now is the time where people can sit back and maybe think through properly what are the good things that we can take out of this. Now, talking about the rivers that was mentioned, the rivers, you've never seen it so clean before. So climate change is something that we could actually address if we really wanted to, or even, no longer having to shake hands or able to shake hands. There might be new things we can actually get out of it, like working from home, for example, spending more time with the family, virtuality. I think that will really come in, and other things to be more science-driven, to be data-driven, to look at the facts rather than the presumption. And I think if we can continue, this conversation will be very different in 6 months' time. Sometimes it will be seen, if this was just a bump in the road, they'll all say we are alarmists. We are people who just were so alarmed and look at it, nothing happened, we are back to normal. I think that would be the worst outcome that we can have from something like this. I think that's what I just want to leave with the people. Yeah.
Thank you very much. In fact, earlier I wanted to say, if everybody can have some key points that you want people to take away from this webinar, but I think you have almost summarized it in your own way, the different framework that you have. A quick thing is that maybe in 6 months' time, maybe we should have another webinar as such and see where we are and whether, have we seen any sort of changes and shifts in how states, how policymakers think on this. Certainly, REFSA would be bringing up some of these points through our work as well. I think just if I can summarize it very quickly, I think Her Excellency mentioned putting human back into the design of cities and in everything that we do. It always have to go to the people that are living in it. And I think Hamdan mentioned a very good point about rethinking our relationship with housing, making sure that because the way we think about housing will also affect how they are being designed, especially whether when it comes to, is it just an item that you use or is it something that, you put in economic activity into it. And last but not least, I think Loke Mun mentioned again and again on the climate change, which I think is a very key point, and that should also go into the decisions that we are make going forward in terms of how we can build a better sort of urban model. So I think on that front, unfortunately, I will have to close this webinar. I would like to thank everybody. There are still almost 300 people on this call with us. We are very grateful that you spent the afternoon with us. Thank you all for joining us. We will be putting up this video on our website as well. And I hope that you enjoyed it and you took back some points with you. Thank you so much to all the speakers. We're really grateful that you are able to spend your time with us. So if I may, I will just close this session for today. Next week, we have another session about building back better, how we can build back a better society. If you follow us on Facebook and on Twitter, we will be putting up the details shortly. Before I do that, if there's anything that any of the speakers would like to say, please mention it. I'm sorry that there's a lot of Q&A, but we are unable to answer every single one. But hopefully we'll be able to do a session similar like that in the future. So for any speakers, if there's anything you would like to mention, if not, then I can close the webinar for today. Nope. Great. Oh, yes.
And what do you call it's a great opportunity, and I believe that let's have more conversation because the future is unknown and uncertain. So the more that we are able to engage and discuss across different groups will only help us to become clearer in our minds. And the way we look at it is that we need to actually shape the future that we want and not be the one who's going to be receiving and be on the receiving end. So thank you very much.
Very well said, Hamdan. Thank you.
Yeah, Ihan, from me, thank you very much for having me here. And what my last point is that we need an integrated, balanced development. We are already following the new urban agenda, leaving no one behind and no place behind, leaving no one behind and no place behind, and respect the nature. Thank you very much. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yes.
Loke Mun?
No, I'm okay. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you. I'll be closing
Thank
off the
you.
session very soon. Thank you.
Okay.
Have
Okay.
a good
Bye.
day ahead. Bye. Bye. Stay safe,
Bye.
everyone.
I'll get your numbers from Ihan, okay?
Yes, please.
Yeah, let's keep in contact.
Okay.
I found it very interesting getting all your information.
Thank you.
Yes, no problem. I can share that. Thank you, guys. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.